Okay, so I'm reposting this after having removed all my posts on the topic. As it is now safe for me to do so, Ken is no longer in my life as of now, so I can post without worrying that he'll come across it. Ken is my cousin. Ken is also a neckbeard. An interesting thing to note is that, while having bad hygiene, is no way ugly. Yes, he is rather plain looking, however. He is greasy, edgy, and a hardcore weeb. I am a socially awkward teenage girl who is heavily involved with the fine arts, D&D, and I DJ in my school's dances, as well as I set up for them. Mark is a friend who, while not what would be called a Chad, is intimidating enough to scare neckbeards off. He and his girlfriend are some of my closest friends. Violet is Mark's girlfriend. Violet and I look very similar to one another, but she has the added value of being super timid and quite the anime fan. The whole mess started when I performed at a school party. Ken saw me and determined that I was his dream girl. Ken introduces himself and asks to have lunch with me. I politely decline, claiming that my friends do not like new people around without warning. He accepts hesitantly, then walks away. Not having spoken 50 words to me, he dumps his girlfriend, super kind girl, felt so bad for her. He then asks me to the upcoming school dance. I do not outright say no, which I should have, and gave him an "I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to go, and if I do, I'm working the dance" excuse. Thinking that what I said was a polite rejection, I go on my merry way. He comes to my classes, asks me in the halls, even stops me from getting on the bus. I then finally told him no, and to buzz off. He sadly walks away. I finally get some common sense and tell my mom. Apparently rejecting him was the good thing because she tells me that I am his cousin. Distant, but cousins nonetheless. I tell Ken this, and he just says that it was a poor excuse to reject him. I began avoiding Ken like the plague for the rest of the school year. I let Mark be my bodyguard for like a week, but eventually Ken started leaving me alone. Enter Violet and Mark. Violet and Mark are a really happy couple who both enjoy many of the same things. However, Ken decides that he cannot have me. He would have the next best thing, my close friend who somewhat resembles me. He first flirts with her for a little bit, and then homecoming rolls around. The homecoming dance in my hometown is very casual, though some people do try to look nicer than usual. I'm setting up the audio equipment with my father when Ken comes about a half hour too early for the dance, decked out in a tux, holding a bouquet of flowers. He comes up and chats with me, even tries giving me the flowers. Luckily, my dad knew about Ken and shooed him off each time. The dance starts, and Violet, with Mark in tow, show up. Ken tries to give her the flowers, gets rejected, and nearly gets beat up by Mark. Ken does not give up, and he makes Violet so uncomfortable she goes home. The rest of the night was uneventful outside of a little fake tantrum by Ken. A few months later, I'm going shopping with my grandmother when we see Ken and his guardian, also his grandmother. The two old ladies get excited and catch up as they are related. Ken asks me if this was my adopted grandmother, to which I say no. His grandmother even confirms it, as we have photos of us together as kids. Neither of us remembered each other. Ken gets it in his head that we were in some sort of anime where I was his childhood friend and that we were finally reunited. Remember how I said Ken was not ugly? Well, some girl asks him out and he flatly rejects her. I happen to know the girl. Small rural town, everyone knows everyone, so I ask Ken why he rejected her. He says that is because she is not me. I remind him that we were never going to be a thing. This causes him to go on a rant about how I am the reason he cannot get a girlfriend, all because he keeps comparing them to me. I stop being nice at this point and tell him that it is not my problem, then I walk away. A few months later, during summer break, he texts, I to this day have no clue how he got my number, me telling me that he knows what he did was wrong and that he wants to get help. I tell him that if that is true, then that's great. It goes downhill when he says that all he needs to get better is my friendship. I do not even have to be his girlfriend, just be his friend. I tell him that while I supported his decision to get help, I was not comfortable being his friend. He insists that he needs me in order to get the help he needs, and I tell him that I have my own problems and that I was not qualified to help him. I then block him. Fast forward to now, and he has some creepy wreck of a guy. He does not know anything about personal space. He makes inappropriate jokes, and I now cannot avoid him during school hours. Luckily, he did a series of stupid things and got thrown out of school. Well, that is the story of Ken, the cousin-loving neckbeard. I learned a lot from this creep. For example, just say no the first time and do not feel guilty if they do something stupid because they reject you. From summer 2015 to spring 2006, my life was hopeless and unbearable in just about every category you can name. I'll spare you all the gory details, but let's just say this was reflected in my mental health. So much so that during this period there was not a day that passed by when I did not fantasize about jumping in front of a train. Couple this with a long history of butchered social interactions and literal Asperger's syndrome, and the whole shit show would make the crucifixion of Christ look like a therapeutic massage. My social life has been trash for most of my life, but during this abortion of a year, it was at rock bottom, and like the characters from The Road by Cara McCarthy, in my desperation, my standards for social nourishment dropped tremendously. This is where the neckbeard friend came in. Let's just call him Eric. I had no indication for the first couple of months of our friendship that Eric was the way he is. We initially bonded over our mutual obsessions with ignorant slam metal, Warhammer, 40,000 Fluff, and the game Doom, and truth be told, he was a bitter fucking misanthrope just like I was at the time. Eric was one of my people on the face of the planet who actually enjoyed the game Hatred. And to quote the protagonist of that shit heap, we just fucking hate this world and the human worms and feasting on its carcass. I feel like I'm cursed in that almost all of my interests seem to be magnets for shit golems, him, Eric. I guess you can call me a platonic neckbeard bait. Then it seems as if one day a switch went off in Eric's head that caused him to desecrate my Facebook feed with a steady stream of alt-right stripe. This was overt, bona fide fucking bigotry. Not just the insidious subsurface racism that most people admittedly deny exists. I explicitly recall Eric posting one meme of a chicken piece and a wedding ring box with the caption, "This is how N-word propose." Another time he shared a song called Sexual Assault by the Ronchus Brothers, who might as well be the house band on the incel forum, Remove Kebab, Deus Volt, and Didn't Do Nothing memes were like a take for him. Initially, I thought all of this was part of some elaborate trolling kick. There's no way a human could genuinely believe that shit as repulsive as Eric, right? Well, I was lying to myself because I did not have the balls to hold him accountable. I could not bear the thought of how Eric would react if I called him out. Eric's meme shares were soon in between fake news articles so vile they'd make you lose faith in journalists as a whole. One's about how Syrian refugees were Zog agents who will turn Western civilization into one race mulatto species and other defamatory shit like that. At that point, I knew he was not just acting like a dick. He unironically embraced this vomit. I think Eric even expressed sympathy for Autumn Waffen once. I cannot think of any word in the English language to quantify how much this fucked with my head. This was still before the alt-right had enough news attention that most people consider them a credible threat. Since I am autistic, bisexual, and decidedly an SJW, if Eric's Turner Diary bad fantasies were to become a reality, I would be among the millions hanged from the street lamps. I felt betrayed to the point where the antagonist of a novel I am writing was inspired by him and our friendship. Well, if anything, it's that pathetic neckbeard Eric who deserves the rope. I remember in one message conversation, Eric told me he had gone through a suicidal period a few years before. As shitty as it sounds, I kind of wish he went through with it. My sympathy for fellow depression, mental illness sufferers does not extend to anyone who's also a bigot, abuser, or rapist. Not until they show an iota of honest remorse and will make amends. I think it's all the more fucked up how the alt-right exploits lonely, depressed men in positions very similar to my own. It's just about the sickest thing I can imagine, almost like ISIS finds recruits. I cringe at thinking about how, if I made just a couple different turns in life, Eric and I might have had more in common. Now, I know body-shaming people is not exactly proper form, but I think it's time to give a face to the man. And besides, it's fucking Eric, so who gives a shit? Eric had a literal rust-red neckbeard and a buzz cut with a fucked-up hairline. He is also the only person I've ever seen to have a literal hook nose. I imagine he had the hygiene of Papa Nurgle. My only regret about shunning Eric is that I did not do it sooner. This came with a bunch of other radical but necessary changes I made to my life. Now, I've grown so much that I finally had a sense of what things like family and hope feel like, which were pretty much alien feelings up until recently. My current friends group is full of fellow degenerates who I love doing degenerate shit with. Better still, they are in real life. These are people who all, for the most part, share my same beliefs. I screen incoming friend requests for potential Erics. Shortly before unfriending and blocking Eric on every social media platform, he made a post about how people who cut off friendships over politics were petty and weak. I think it's actually one of the more legit reasons, because it can tell you whether or not the friend even wants people like you alive.